We'll have term limits for Congress. And mandatory mental competency tests for politicians over 75 years old. Most of all, I see a strong America because I see a proud America. Strong and proud, not weak and woke. That's the America I see.
So this is a pretty fascinating story. So Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley is one of the only ones other than Trump who's actually formally announced a bid for the White House. I think she was like UN ambassador or something like that under the Trump administration. Sorry, I'm forgetting, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Her tenure as UN ambassador actually ended in a scandal. I think it was some kind of like scandalous spending or something, so keep that in mind. But Nikki Haley, she had that really embarrassing moment with that, I think it was a resolution on like Palestine, I think it was, that failed, and she couldn't like get any support for it. It was pretty embarrassing. But she said, this story says, Haley calls for, quote, mental competency tests for politicians over 75. This is fascinating. So it says, Nikki Haley, the newly minted Republican presidential candidate, called on Wednesday for mandatory, quote, mental competency tests for politicians older than 75, an implied dig at President Biden and her one-time boss, former President Trump. Speaking at a rally in Charleston, South Carolina, kicking off her 2024 White House bid, Haley ran through a litany of political promises, including enacting term limits for members of Congress and cracking down on illegal immigration. But it was a vow to impose mandatory cognitive tests on older office holders that underscored the central message of her campaign, that the United States needs a younger leader after previously electing two of the oldest men to ever occupy the White House. Quote, in the America I see, the permanent politician will finally retire, Haley said. We'll have term limits for Congress and mandatory mental competency tests for politicians over 75 years old. And so, it's talking about, obviously, both Biden and Trump. Obviously, Trump is her opponent. This is just actually really underscores a lot of stuff that we have to get into political science-wise in terms of analyzing this through a political science lens, which we're about to do. But there's also a story here. It says, Feinstein corrected by staffer about retirement announcements. So people had already started announcing Katie Porter, I think Adam Schiff, like a bunch of people are already announcing they're running for her seat before she even formally retired. But there was a retirement, issued, and then she forgot that she had done it. She's really one of the worst examples of this, but because she's like purely demented, right? And so I think Chuck Schumer came out and said that like he had to repeat something to her, like he had to tell her twice because she had forgot. It was like on the DOJ or something, or not the DOJ, but like the Judiciary Committee or something. I forget exactly, but it's scary to think about though. But what's more scary than that is, to me, the voters not holding her accountable. To me, that's on the voters, not her. It's the voters' job to see that and be like, oh, okay, well, we shouldn't have a demented, and no offense to demented people, right? But you need competent people who can lead, right? And that's obviously not someone who can. You should be at home, being taken care of, not, running our country, right? So that's on the voters more so than Feinstein herself. But this is like going to be, I would imagine, so political science-wise speaking here, right? This is interesting because obviously the people who are up in age, anybody, so anytime I make a criticism of older people or something like that voting, for me personally, I don't understand why we have a voting age requirement but no cap on voting. It doesn't make any sense to me because we know that the brain starts to seriously degrade and get destroyed as you get older, the same way that your brain develops as you grow older. So it's like a weird thing, but it's obvious because old people have power, right? Adults have power in society. Kids don't have power in society, right? So that's the reason. I think that's unfair. How could you have a requirement to vote but not a cap on it as well when we know that your brain starts to diminish and get destroyed? Not only that, but thing about being old is like there's like an inherent corruption on it too, is like you're not going to live to see the things that you're advocating for. And so you're essentially corrupted because at that point, what you're advocating for, you won't see the things of that. So a lot of old people don't care about climate change because they're not going to be impacted by it. So F you, I don't care. I'm 80 years old. I'm going to die soon. I don't care about climate change, how it's going to impact it. And so it's just like, that's essentially like the same thing as, being corrupted. You know what I mean? Same kind of concept essentially, right? You're not voting in the interest of the country. So I think that that's just super unfair. And we live in a gerontocracy. I've taken this political science, upper division political science class on U.S. elections and voting, and the professor's like, he's a really old dude too. He's like, we live in a gerontocracy, and he says this is not normal. Comparing us to other countries, it's like everybody is super old. This is not a normal thing. And really, the problem is first past the post district voting. It is destroying America. First past the post voting is destroying America. And so first past the post voting is elections in which the person who gets the most votes wins. That's it. You don't need a majority, and it's in districts. You just have like these carved out districts, and you have that happen, right? And that's who wins. This is horrible because it creates like factional wins, people who didn't actually get a majority. It suppresses the vote as well because there's a lack of proportionality. You need to have like a specific amount of people in one singular district just to be able to win the election, which makes it really difficult, lowers representation, competitiveness, fairness, etc. So the solution, this is to save America. We need proportional representation, at least half. I think Germany in their what is it, Bundestag, I think is what it's called. I'm not sure, their Congress, right? But they have it like split, where it's like, oh, like half of it is district based, and then half of it is like proportional representation. So what is proportional representation? Proportional representation is you get a national ballot saying which party do you support for Congress, and you support the party, you vote for the party, not for a candidate in your district. So you might say, I support the Green Party, I support this. And then we get the results, we look at the percentage points, and then we, based on the proportionality of the percentage, delegate those congressional seats to those parties. So it also helped third parties as well. You'd have to get coalitions, meaning that there would be an incentive for parties to work together to be more cohesive and not just so insane, right? And so you'd have like the Green Party gets 3%, 5%. Instead of the first past the post district voting, in which they would get no seats, you would then get 3 or 5% of the congressional seats. That's great. That's what we need, because that's actually representative and fair. And the best part about that is you don't have candidate-centered elections. You have party-centered elections, which are way better, because then you don't need a specific candidate with a ton of dough, partisan support, all this stuff. So like Jacinda Ardern, for example, who is, she's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, right? She's like really young, super young. She was able to get there because it's a party-based system. It's not like a candidate. If she had to run as her own like you do in the US, she would have zero chance. But the party just puts up names. They have their own list of names. You vote for the party and they put up those people. And it's like, so it's not candidate-centered, so you can have those people win. They don't need money. They don't need a lot of money. You don't need any of that stuff because it's party-centered. So to save America, we need proportional representation. We have way more actual competent people in office, because you wouldn't need to do all this bullshit where you have to pander to people, do a bunch of out-group resentment, and do all this terrible stuff. And then we need public financing as well, where the government, gives matching funds or just straight up spends money on elections, have spending caps on campaigns as well, which is better than donation caps. But the thing is, right, from a political science perspective, this is going to be, I think what she's trying to do is kind of a Hail Mary. I think everybody's probably wondering, like, why the hell did John McCain nominate Sarah Palin as his vice president? Like, what a moron she was. That's such a dumb decision. But basically what happened was John McCain was going to lose. That's actually why he suspended his campaign during the 2008 crash. It was like this Hail Mary attempt to try to, muck him up as like the hero or whatever. It failed, obviously, miserably. But he was going to lose, so it was like, all right, what's a Hail Mary we can throw? You know what I mean? Sarah Palin. So it's like they already knew they were going to lose, so they did something crazy out of the box to try to win. You know what I mean? That's the explanation. It wasn't like a genuine thing where it's like, oh, this is a good pick. It's like, nah, we just had to throw Hail Mary and see. Hopefully it works. This is kind of what it is here. This is not going to work right now. I think in the future this might work as, young people are taking over. As you guys saw Gen Z in the 2020, 2022 general election. And I always had the question kind of like, why did young people have more of an impact in the general election than the primary? Because in the primary they didn't do shit, and I learned about that in my political science class too. There's a way, way, way higher participation rate in general elections and primary elections for young people because they don't feel attachment to a party. And so since the party primary is like the people within the party, it's less participation. So that's really, I didn't know that. That's really important information to know as well in terms of political analysis. So, these tests are not going to be popular with old people. Old people get really, really offended when you say anything about that because they want to hold their power. They're power hungry, right? Everyone's power hungry, right? And so they don't want to lose their power. They have money. They have seniority. Old people have all the power in society, literally all of it. Most of them are old men. But how old is Nikki Haley? She's 51 years old. Like, isn't that crazy that that's like considered young? Um, like AOC is like actually young, right? Like she's like 51, and that's like, but in comparison though, like a proper statistical analysis, she's a baby in this context because of how many standard deviations she is away from the mean, right? To the left of the mean. How many Z scores is she away from the mean, right? It's got to be a lot, right? Like at least -3, like as many as you can possibly go. So that is young. 51 is young. We should not have a system of a gerontocracy. It should be more representative, and so old people should be represented as well. I would probably favor like a 65 age voting cap and then like a 25 age voting requirement. 25 is when your brain fully develops. Honestly, 18-year-olds are kind of morons. They're idiots, I would say. But it's like, you basically have a fully developed brain, and that would be a better time. But, I don't think this is going to work, but it's kind of like similar. We can analogize with the whole situation of, um, with the whole situation of the McCain Sarah Palin thing, we can kind of analogize this. I don't think this is a genuine winning strategy. I think it's just like I need to carve a lane for myself. Just like Trump is a factional leader, he's a factional leader, right? She's trying to develop her own faction, especially because political science wise, this is going to be likely a factional race where there's like 16 candidates. So when you're running in a factional race, you want to avoid sharing your space with anyone. You want to just be your lane and run that lane as hard as you can. It's actually one of the dangers of our primary system. But that's what she's trying to do here. So it's not going to work. It might in the future, but it's not going to be popular with old people who are the biggest voters, especially in primaries. In primaries, old people are like all the voters, basically. These young people don't vote in primaries at all. And so it's not going to work, but I don't think she thinks it's going to work. It's just like kind of throwing shit at the wall to see if it sticks.